I'm going to present two very brief position papers we submitted here. So one is basically musing on the question that I've been thinking about for a while, which is how to make the proto-AGI systems that many of us are building useful and interesting to software application developers. I mean, in addition to my AGI research work, I've done a bunch of practical software application building work for various customers, and we customize OpenCog on a sort of ad hoc basis for various commercial applications. And I'm aware that it's many months of work to make a custom application utilizing a part of OpenCog for something. So I've thought a bunch about like what would you need to do to take early stage AGI systems like LIDA, Sigma, OpenCog, MicroPsi, any of these systems we're talking about, and make them more easily useful for application development. And one thought I had is if you could develop some sort of cognitive API for an AGI system which abstracted away from the specific representations and algorithms inside the system and just let you ask generic questions of the sort that are interest for applications, that would certainly help. And pretty much the position paper runs through a bunch of ideas what these API calls might look like. Some representative examples would be, okay, your input is some picture or video, what's happening here? Or you have this goal, which would have to be described in some fairly generic formal language. What sub-goals would you want to achieve to pursue this goal? Here's two people, or here's two genes. What are the relations between these things? And if you could say throw over a REST API a query like this to some system and get an answer back, that's sort of a cognitive service that an application developer might want to rely upon. And of course, there will be a lot of work to formulate a cognitive service like this in a useful way that application developers would be willing and able to easily use, as well as the problem of making the AI systems actually be able to answer these questions. But the idea would be to have an API like this that you could then plug multiple proto-AGI systems behind, some fulfilling some types of queries, some fulfilling others, ultimately fulfilling all of them once we really get there. And it will be vaguely like these toolkits like Weka or Waffles, which wrap up loads of supervised learning and clustering algorithms behind the common API, and then they can be easily extended by people who plug new learning algorithms inside them. I think something like this would be very useful to have, and also would be motivational to people building systems, in that it would give you more reason to make your system answer the useful questions that are encapsulated in the API, because it would bring users. And you could also use this as a different way to think about general intelligence, a more practical way than things like the AXE-like definitions that folks like Marcus Suter have proposed. I mean, if you have a whole bunch of API calls spanning many different types of practical questions, I mean, you could look, on average, how well does the system do across all these things? And then you could say, well, okay, what's the breadth? I mean, you don't want to reward a system that does well on only one type of question and fails in everything else. But you want to reward something that does well on average and also has its quality spread reasonably across many different types of questions. So the average quality and the breadth. And of course, you could also reward a system for being simple and not too complicated. So I don't think you could really make a super meaningful quantitative measure and say, well, the AI quotient of LIDA is 3.7, the AI quotient of Sigma is 3.9. But I think it gives a different way of thinking about the generality of intelligence of a system. And anyway, I think this can be a useful direction for AGI development going forward. Maybe it's a couple years too early for it, but I think once we have something like this, it could spur a lot of interesting collaboration between the AGI and application development worlds. So that's that.